Hi everyone, it's Cindy. Welcome back to Studioloo. We're here today for another episode of Short Story Scraps, and I'm sharing with you a Canadian author today, Denis Thoreau, chapter 3 of his book, The Postman's Round, which is about this postman who is, I would say, quite acutely good at his job, but he has this clandestine activity of steaming open all of the personal letters that he finds in the mail to read them, and then reseals them and delivers them. And he comes across a bunch of letters written to another gentleman by who he refers to as a Guadeloupean beauty. Her name is Sejoline, and she just sends haikus. And so he's like falling in love with her from afar as a bizarre stranger who is intercepting her mail. So let me share with you chapter 2, along with the high recommendation of picking up this book, The Postman's Round by Denis Thoreau, because it is a wonderful book. I've gotten a little further in it than what I'm reading to you today, and I'm having a hard time putting it down. So let's jump into chapter 2. Bilodeau was an unusual postman. Among the thousands of soulless papers he delivered on his rounds, he occasionally came across a personal letter, a less and less common item in this era of email, and all the more fascinating for being so rare. What had happened? When that happened, Bilodeau felt as excited as a prospector spotting a gold nugget in his pan. He did not deliver that letter, not right away. He took it home and steamed it open. That's what kept him so busy at night in the privacy of his apartment. Bilodeau was an inquisitive postman. He himself never received personal mail. He would have liked to, but didn't have anyone to whom he was close enough to correspond with. He used to send letters to himself, but the experience had been a disappointment. He gradually stopped and didn't really miss it. He didn't miss himself. More alluring by far were letters from others, real letters, written by real people who preferred the sensual act of writing by hand, the delightfully languorous anticipation of the reply, to the reptilian coldness of the keyboard and instantaneity of the internet. People for whom the act of writing was a deliberate choice, and in some cases one sensed a matter of principle, a stand taken in favor of a lifestyle not quite so determined by the race against time and the obligation to perform. There were those comical letters Doris T. wrote from Maria in the Gaspe Peninsula to hear her sister, Gwendolen, to fill her in on the local gossip. Then those heart-rending ones Richard L. detained in the Port Cartier prison, sent to his young son Hugo. There were those long, mystical epistles Sister Regine of the Congregation du Saint-Rosaire in Rimouski dispatched to her old friend Germaine, and those erotic little tales Letitia D., a young nurse temporarily exiled in the Yukon, composed for her lonely fiancé, and also those strange missives in which a mysterious O gave advice to a certain N on how to safely invoke various supernatural beings. There was anything and everything, coming from here, there, and everywhere. Letters from close relatives and faraway correspondents, letters from beer tasters comparing notes, from globe-trotters writing their mothers, from retired steam locomotive firemen listing their bumps and bruises. There were those overly reassuring letters servicemen dispatched from Afghanistan to their anxious wives, and those worried words uncles wrote to their nieces concerning secrets that shouldn't be revealed for anything in the world, and those Dear John or Dear Mary letters in which circus acrobats in Las Vegas broke up with former lovers. And there were even hate letters crammed with insults spilling out onto the envelope. But above all, there were love letters, because even after Valentine's Day, love remained the most common denominator, the subject linking the greatest number of pens. Love in every grammatical form and every possible tone, dished up in every imaginable shape. Passionate letters or courteous ones, sometimes suggestive and sometimes chaste, either calm or dramatic, occasionally violent, often lyrical and especially moving when the feelings were expressed in simple terms, and never quite so touching as when the emotions hid between the lines, burning away almost invisibly behind a screen of innocuous words. Once he'd read and reread the letter of the day, had savored it down to the very marrow, Bilodeau made a photocopy of it for his records. He put this in a folder whose color corresponded to the subject, which he placed in a fireproof filing cabinet. He would slip the original letter back into its envelope, deftly seal it, and drop it in the addressee's mailbox the next day as if nothing had happened. He had been practicing this clandestine activity for 2 years now. It was a crime, he was well aware of that, but guilt paled into insignificance beside supreme curiosity. No one was hurt by it, after all, and he himself didn't risk much as long as he continued to be careful. Who was going to worry when the delivery of a letter was 24 hours late? And for a start, who could know it was late? Bilodeau intercepted about 30 correspondences in this way. Altogether, they formed a kind of soap opera with multiple plots, or rather half of a soap opera, whose other half, the one of the outgoing mail, was unfortunately unavailable to him. But he liked to make up that other part, to draft elaborate replies he never mailed. And when other letters arrived, he was often amazed to see how naturally it fitted with his own secret reply. That's how it was. Bilodeau lived vicariously. To the dullness of real life, he preferred his infinitely more colorful, more thrilling interior serial drama. And of all the clandestine letters that constituted this fascinating little virtual world, none mobilized or enchanted him more than the ones from Séjoline. So that is chapter 3. And what a fascinating thought and like a look into, the story of this peculiar postman. So it made me think a lot about, letter writing and the kinds of letters that I've written throughout my life and received throughout my life. And then also thinking about, the ease at which we are able to communicate digitally and like how that changes us. It's kind of like I was reflecting recently on my daughter getting one of those, Instamax cameras where like she'd had access to a children's digital camera before, and she didn't have to think at all about what she would snap photos of because it's all just stored on a card that can store thousands of these images. There's no, there's no attachment to, there's no sacrifice of anything to just snap that photo. But like when you've got 20 shots available to you on this, roll of film or whatever, you think differently. So I've been working through that thought process with her, and she's now become quite precious about what she wants to take photos of. So like I apply that thinking to the way that we communicate these days. And it's interesting because, as a junk journaler and an ephemera collector, I collect a lot of old postcards and things. And people used to be like, I would say, when this was, popular in the 1800s, the sending of postcards, as well as like most of the 1900s, probably up to about, I would say the 70s, people were still sending postcards, probably some into the 80s, as well as letter mail. People would sit down and handwrite and take the time, especially on postcards, to just send the most, it's a very short message. It's kind of like a tweet these days, or a blue sky message, right? Like a shorter message. But these days I feel like even though we have the digital ability as well as phones and texting and all that to communicate, we often don't. Like I think about when is the last time that not only did I write a letter to someone where it wasn't part of like happy mail and a, kind of a nostalgic, like let's write letters as pen pals kind of thing. Like that's kind of special to our personalities or specific to the fact that we are letter writing, paper loving kind of people. But when is the last time that I wrote just a functional letter to someone? And then also, when is the last time that I wrote an email to someone to just sort of send them an update, right? Like, how are things in my life? What's going on? Ask them about themselves. It's been a very, very long time for all of that, right? So it's interesting how, letter mail really enabled people to, stay connected. And I think it still does. Like for people who are military, maybe they still write letters, although I would imagine they have access to tablets and things. Like I know people in prison even do. So a lot of what they do is through like a paid kiosk. They talk to one another on the phone or through emails, short emails, but it's all paid for. But like I'm sure with the military, it's kind of similar. I doubt that a lot of letter mail is being received, but I don't know that as I'm not military, nor do I have any family who are. But I wonder how much letter mail happens these days. It's sort of interesting to think about. But the other thought process that this took me on was about how you like protect your own communication and the things that can happen to people to make them like let down their guard or remove their barriers. So I think about these people that I used to know, that I used to work with. I wasn't close to them, but I was kind of close with the woman of this not couple who were working together and having some kind of a fling. And I found out about it by accident one day. Not going to mention too many details here, but I found out about it, and then also like, you know, once they knew that I found out about it, it was like, and they knew I had like no personal like investment in what they do as people, because I don't really know either of them. I didn't know if they had families or anything. We were just kind of passing ships sort of thing. But like every now and then I would wander by her desk and she would like tongue in cheek show me a message that he had sent her, but like it was on a work computer, on a work application. They would send emails, they would send messages that were totally unprofessional, inappropriate. Regardless though, I think about like that is available. Can you imagine like what you would go through as an employee if like for some reason your IT department had reason to like look at your messages? Like maybe there was a security issue in the company unrelated to you, but they wanted to take a look at people's communications, or maybe they were looking for another reason to get rid of you or to get rid of that other person, and they looked at your emails or your communications. Like, do you know how absolutely vulnerable you are in those kind of scenarios, right? I don't think a lot of people do, or like they do, but the drive to do what you're doing intimately with someone, it's like you just let down your guard or something. It's very weird. So, so, you know, in this whole story of like this guy just kind of like snooping on people, it made me think a lot about like the information that we have and what we protect, and how like, you know, this is all kind of coming to a bit of a forefront right now in this digital age of like colliding with the billionaire class who control so much of our data. They collect it, they sell it, they create profiles of who we are to market things to us, and then potentially use our data for other less innocuous things, like providing to insurance companies or I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities, right? That your data could be misused. So I guess my PSA is to encourage you to protect your data and think about the platforms you communicate on. We just learned that like Facebook and WhatsApp are also using the messages that are sent there to feed their AI and to market to you. So, you know, think about when you share a password or a login or a secret or anything like that very carefully, because even if you hit delete or erase on your computer, it's there, right? It's on the internet, it's still there. And that, you know, applies also to like things like Snapchat, where you've sent a photo and then it disappears after 24 hours. Like, it's never truly gone. And remember that on every device possible, you can screenshot and record things that people think are temporary. So make sure you talk to your kids about that. There's a lot of great like videos on YouTube about this, about just data security and kids. There's a lot of great Instagrammers that also cover those kind of topics. You know, once you start to look for it, you can definitely find it. But yeah, this book is really enjoyable. It's very cozy. It's a great book to kind of curl up with. It's a short book. And I just really love these kind of stories that get told about these people. It makes me look at my neighbors differently. Like, I have this strange habit of when I'm in the car, especially in the winter time, right? And in the evening when it's so dark, so early here, you know, everyone has their lights on so you can see into their homes as you're driving by. And so I'm often a passenger in the car while my husband is driving. And I'll just kind of look in all the windows as I go by, just at people domestically doing things like preparing dinner and sitting and watching television and that kind of thing. it's interesting, right? Voyeurism and people watching and like the various levels. Like I think there's a lot of joy to be had in the innocuous levels of voyeurism, like people watching at a mall, or, you know, overhearing things that people say, like, you know, on a subway car or whatever. Like, I used to read many years ago, there was like a blog about like things that someone overheard on a subway. I think it was the TTC in Toronto, actually, and they would keep a blog about it. And like, I've had some really fascinating times where I've overheard conversations and I've gotten so invested, like, and I don't feel bad at all. I feel kind of like this is so human and natural and normal that you should be like interested in other people, right? Even if it's none of your business, like we all have that curiosity. I think as long as you're not like acting on it or doing anything with the information, like it's fine to have a giggle and to just kind of quietly observe and listen to the experience. Like I went to this really weird restaurant one time with my husband. We'd never gone there before. This was before we had kids. It was like in a kind of a small town, but it was like a large, I would say medium fancy, probably very fancy for the town we were in, but like probably in a normal city, like probably a mid-range kind of restaurant. It was Italian, and but like Canadian Italian, like not, you know, fancy Italian. So I remember this place because two weird things happened. So number one, my husband got spaghetti, and in the sauce they put a ton of cinnamon, and he was just grossed out beyond belief. He's like, cinnamon does not belong in pasta sauce. Like, he was so offended by this spaghetti, but at the same time, like, he's also not the type of person to return things or to not eat them, because he's like, I paid the money, plus I don't want to be like, you know, a complainer, right? He's accommodating in that way. And so he sat there miserably eating his cinnamon spaghetti while we listened to this couple that were sitting at a table next to us. So we were sitting at a regular table with regular chairs that sat on the floor, but they were sitting on this kind of raised up area that had like 3 stairs that went up to this little kind of fenced in area that had tables that had those really high chairs, like a bar stool. So they were sitting kind of right above us. So everything they said was kind of, you know, bouncing down on us. And so we were being quiet anyways, because I think my husband was doing everything he could to eat his cinnamon spaghetti. And I was enjoying the little flatbread pizza that I had. It was quite nice. But they were talking about their affair. And like, so they were going on, they were people in probably, I would say like their late 50s, maybe early 60s, because I think he was retired. And so they were talking about how they had just gone on a golfing vacation together in Florida. But like, he was pretty sure that his wife was suspicious who he was with. And like, they were talking about, you know, essentially, like they'd had some conflicts with her husband too, almost catching him dropping something off to her that she forgot at his house. And so it's just like listening to them basically talking about like how to get better at their deceit. So the whole time, my husband and I are like eating like super quiet little church mice or something, and like our eyes were like huge, just looking at each other like it was the naughtiest thing we'd ever heard, right? But yeah, I absolutely love when things like that unfold. Like there's I think we all do, but like a lot of folks just they have trouble admitting it, or maybe many of you are those kind of, I don't know, people who are just like, I mind my own business. Okay, I am not her. I will overhear these things and then tell YouTube about them. So if you're a stranger and you see me, look out. Don't be cackling your secrets loudly in a restaurant, because I will probably anonymously out you to my YouTube channel. So yeah, that is everything I thought about with the Postman's Round. So thank you for joining me. I'm going to probably go now because my son is jumping on a trampoline above my head. If you're hearing some banging, he is upstairs and I am downstairs. So have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again really soon. Bye for now.